Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our tech session, Hall 3. This is our third section. This is Hall 3, and now we are in the third session of today. The next paper will be presented by Professor Dr. Ahmad Zahari from University Putra, Malaysia, with the title Environmental Pollution, Daily Exposure, and Potential Risk of Emerging Pollutants in Water Supply. With this, please welcome Professor Dr. Ahmad Zahari Aris. Over to you, please, Prof. You have 30 minutes.
Thank you, Engineer Ko, for the introduction. So let me share my screen first. All right, so I hope that everyone can see the screen clearly right now. So first of all, Assalamualaikum and Salam Sejahtera. So let me start my introduction about the topics that I'm going to deliver today. So basically what I'm going to talk is actually more on the emerging pollutants and how this particular emerging pollutant can be actually becoming a risk push to the human health, especially in the water supply. So my name is Ahmad Zahari Aris from the Institute of Aquaculture and Aquatic Sciences of University Putra, Malaysia. So before we start further, let me try to elaborate further the current scenario that we are having right now. So as we can see, the dramatic growth has been driven largely by the increasing number of people surviving to reproductive age and has been accompanied by the major changes, especially in the fertility rates, increasing urbanizations, and also accelerating migration. So as we can see, people in 2021 is almost 8 billion. And when we have more people, of course, with the current population, the exact number of people living in the earth in coming decades is actually uncertain. And so do with the problems brought up together with this particular increasing numbers of people that we have now. And of course, we know that the population will continue growing, and this will impact the water availability, not only the security itself, but of course, in terms of the quantity and also the quality. And when we talk about that, as the population grows, the demand of the water mounts, and also the pressure to infinite the water resources intensify. And as you can see that the factors affecting the water quality and also quality is not only because of the population growth, it's also because of the industrial and also rural development, as well as the land use changes. The water charges, of course, the water tariff will certainly affect the demand and also the water supply. The consumer preferences, of course, when we talk about that, most of people who are living in the developed country will require more high quality of water. And of course, the weather itself is actually one of the major factors that will control the quantity and also the quality of water. And when we talk about that, when we talk about the water quality issue, of course, the industrial revolution impacted the environment. And the world saw a major increase in population, as I mentioned before, which along with that is also an increase in the living standard, led to the depletions of the resources where people need to utilize and also use the resources. And of course, when we utilizing the resources that are available in the world, the use of the chemicals, for example, and also the fuel factories resulted in increase of the water pollution. And of course, as we can see, started from the first industrial revolution, the use and also the release of the heavy metal contamination, especially in the water, has been an issue, especially in both the environment and also the human health. Since then, more and more water pollutant has been released into the environment. And as we can see that the first US Federal Water Pollution Control Act was introduced in 1948 to combat this particular issue, especially on the heavy metal pollution. And along that way, we can see that more and more revisions of the water quality, including Malaysian National Drinking Water Quality Standard that was established in 2003. Along that way, there are many more other water quality standards being introduced. And of course, we can see that the latest addition to this list is the European Union Drinking Water Regulation that was set in 2014 to also include the new pollutants in the water. And we know that all those water quality standards and also acts that have been established, especially only talk about the basic water quality parameters on the microorganism, physical properties, chemical properties, as well as the radioactive particles. And of course, we'll talk about that since the first industrial revolution, more pollutant has been introduced to the environment, and the industrial revolution swept across the countries as the coal become common in the private residence, smoke, and also industrial pollutions of the chemicals has been released and also claim more life, for example. And the introductions of an alien material and also compound coming from these industrial revolutions now have become a pollutant to the environment. And as you can see that since the second industrial revolutions, more pollutants have been introduced, including a new pollutant that are becoming a major issue in the 21st century, including the bisphenol A, for example, the nanoparticle, microplastics, and also some certain of the pollutants and also drugs in the environment. And of course, pollution is the process of making land and water and also the other parts of the environment dirty and not safe or suitable for the human and also other living life. And the concentration of pollutants are increased by years, where more and more pollutant has been introduced to the environment. And of course, scientists estimate that there are more than thousands of chemicals that have been introduced and also synthesized every year. And just imagine that since the first and also second industrial revolution, there are more than 100,000 of the chemicals has been introduced in the environment. And when we are talking about the new pollutants, the emerging pollutants, or regarded known as the endocrine disrupting compound, the EDC itself is actually the exogenous and also emerging, comprises of the wide ranging of the scope of the chemicals. And we can see that there are more than 100,000 of the chemicals being synthesized, and some of them known as the natural disruptors, while the others are being grouped as the synthetic disruptors. And these particular synthetic disruptors, well known as, for example, the phenolic compound that are being used in the plasticizers, the plastic industry, for example, phthalates, pesticide used in the agricultural sectors, the bactericides, herbicides, for example, and of course, the drugs and also pharmaceutical, the personal care products. While some of the common pharmaceuticals are commonly used, end up in the environment, for example. And we can see that, for example, the common pharmaceutical use in the environments are the antibiotics, the atenolol, for example, that are used to treat the chest pain and also the hypertensions, okay? Among Malaysian, the high blood pressures, okay? Ibuprofen, for example, and also caffeine, where the caffeine itself commonly found in the caffeine tea, for example, but it's also being used as a stimulant drugs. And these particular drugs will end up in our water supply as a new pollutant in the environment. And when we talk about the EDC in the water, the endocrine disrupting compound in the water, the major issue that we are talking right now is because the ineffective treatment process. While most of the countries are still depending on the conventional water treatment facility, this particular conventional water treatment facility are not able to remove this particular pollutant. And of course, this is because we are having a lack background scenario, the database, and population are not aware about the danger of pharmaceutical waste, where some of them will just flush away those unused or expired medicine in their toilet, for example. And we are still under developed method for the analysis. The analytical method for the detections of the EDC are still lacking. And of course, the existing legal and also regulations are inadequate to prevent the direct discharge of this particular pollutant coming from the industrial practices. And of course, the effect of this particular pollutant in the environment will be the health risk to population, as well as the cost of the water will be increased. And we can see that the major issue facing by the Selangor state, for example, are to combat with these particular unknown pollutants. And when we talk about the water security, this particular phenomena, for example, are the key factor for us. And of course, to adapt and also to safeguard the sustainable availability of the water resources. And the window of the water security, as I mentioned before, can be twofold, where the water quantity and also the water quality, for example, needed to ensure the availability, access, and also the safe use of this particular water resources in terms of the adequacy, reliability, and also the resilience of the water itself. And of course, there is something in the tap water that are currently in our concern, as we can see that in most of the developed country, they are looking at this particular endocrine disrupting compound as one of the major parameters to be monitored in their water quality monitoring exercise. And of course, most of the left behind country are still lacking in terms of the monitoring and also bringing up these particular pollutants in their water monitoring exercise. In Malaysia, of course, our water quality guidelines are yet to include this particular pollutant, but most of the scientific exercise, especially from my laboratory, are looking at these particular pollutants in our waterways. And from our studies, the EDC in drinking water system are because of the pollution from the industry and also the point sources of the pollution, especially coming from the domestic, inadequate water treatment plant, unwarranted water supply security, limited water quality monitoring, and also undeveloped detection, limited epidemiological to understand what's the effect of this particular pollutant to environment, and also the holistic system with the multivariate approach are still lacking in terms of the water quality monitoring exercise. And of course, when we talk about this particular pollutant, these are due to the human needs and also finally will end up in our system as unnecessary needs and hard to be avoided. We need it, but finally it ends up in our water system. And these particular pollutants are originated from everyday objects. We are using that every day. We need to use it every day. They are coming, they are resides in our children's toys, plastic drinking bottle, for example, food packaging, even in our home furniture, for example. And the EDC from home to the local waterways, how they end up in our waterways. You buy the item that contain the EDC, we use it, the items in our home, the EDC from this system contaminate our waterways, while the wastewater plant cannot filter out the EDC, and then the EDC are released in the environment, then the aquatic organism will accumulate the EDC and finally will enter the food web, and we as the final receptor will accumulate this particular EDC in our human body. And when we talk about the EDC in the drinking water system, there are two different scenarios that we are looking at right now. Those countries who are having the advanced treatment technology by using the ozonation, granular activated carbon, powdered activated carbon, for example, will having higher efficiency of removal of EDC. But somehow still, the trace concentration of EDC was still remain in our water system. And just imagine that those who are still depending on the conventional water treatment facility that has not been designed for the EDC elimination will have incomplete removal of EDC, and those particular EDC will finally end up in our system. So that's a reason why we need to have a multivariate treatment system for the EDC removal in our system. As I mentioned before, the review of the existing drinking water regulations revealed that the commonly regulated drinking water quality parameters are still very basic, and the WHO revealed that the guidelines are still inadequate based on the current exposure of the EDC in the drinking water system. And of course, the United States, for example, are having an updates of this particular watch list to include all these hundred thousands of the chemical in their water quality monitoring exercise. And these are the current Malaysian drinking water quality standard. As I mentioned before, it's still not comprehensive, but we are still we are also looking at certain, for example, organic pollutant coming from the agricultural practices in our water quality exercise. While somehow absence of the CEC, contaminants of emerging concern, the endocrine disrupting compound in the Malaysian drinking water quality guideline. And from our exercise, these are the common practices that we are monitoring: the Selangor River, Langat River, Linggi Water, Lui, and also Gombak River, where this particular EDC have been found in a certain and also a very range of the concentration from the nanogram to picogram of concentration. And the occurrence of EDC in drinking water supply system has also been studied from our laboratory, and we found out that the EDC in drinking water system are coming from the sources and also the supply, transport and also impact of EDC in the drinking water supply system, treatment sustainability and also water security is needed, and they require inventions of rapid, robust, sensitive, and also efficient sensor in order for us to monitor these particular pollutants in our waterways. And the risk management itself, there is a loophole in the Malaysian legislation where we need the inclusions of pharmaceutical contaminants as part of the waste and also parameter that legislation should be looked into. And why we need to look into the EDC itself. Sorry, the screen. Okay, all right. So why we need to look into the EDC? Because this particular EDC are very dangerous. EDC are everywhere. Very low doses can cause harm and also potential delay effect. And of course, they can actually effect is actually largely overlooked because there is 100,000 of chemicals still yet to be studied. And one of the major concerns that we are looking now is actually the contraceptive pills that are commonly available in the pharmacy, for example. This particular contraceptive pill has been synthesized in 1951, and since then has been in the market. And women who are having, for example, the menstrual cycles are not regular, and then they try to control the birth, for example, are taking this particular pills, okay, to control the birth. And this particular contraceptive pill is also known as the EE2 or 17-alpha-atenyl acetaldehyde. And scientists only figure out that this particular compound is actually a pollutant to the environment. This is because this particular compound, these particular pills can actually create some emerging issues where the fish, for example, the lower organisms in the aquatic are becoming transgender because of this particular hormone will trigger the endocrine system of the lower organism to mimic the original or the natural hormone. And finally, the male fish will become female, for example, or they will be only looking at the same sex for their, for example, fertilities and so on. So the transgender fish has become an issue. It's been reported that at 4 nanogram per liter, it can give some intersex changes where it reduces the fertility. And the European Commission has recommended regulatory level not more than 0.03 nanogram per liter. And if we can put it into the analogy, 1 nanogram per liter is equivalent to 1 ppt, and it's equivalent to 1 drop of water diluted in 20 Olympic size of swimming pool. Just imagine that. At that lower concentration, it can give some intersex changes to the lower organism. And of course, we believe that this finally will affect the human as well, as I mentioned before. The effect will be so obvious where it's been recorded that the effect human directly to the reproductive and also birth, respiratory, neurological, cancer, and also the transgenic. Of course, that will be on the aquatic life. To the human, they will affect the nuclear receptors where the human endocrine system will be affected directly. So the altered interaction is the reason why now the cancer effect and so on are quite common almost every day. And when we talk about the EDC in the water and also drinking water, the wastewater treatment system are not specifically designed to completely remove the EDC. So the remaining is eventually discharged to the receiving rivers. And finally, the conventional treatment system are incapable to remove this particular EDC and also the toxic metals. Broad scope of low absorbent have been discovered. And then the removal of the new contaminant energy of concern such as EDC is the greatest concern because of most are still unknown. And as I mentioned here, the common and also the new facilities that have been developed by using a new technology, for example, the membrane bioreactor, able to remove this particular pollutant. But of course, when we talk about the new technology that can eventually remove this particular pollutant, how about the water tariff? It will eventually increase the water tariff, especially. Are the consumers able, are the consumers ready to have a more expensive water compared to what we are having right now? So this is quite sensitive. So that's a reason why the multi-barrier approach need to be incorporated in order for us to solve this particular problem. And of course, when we are talking about the EDC itself, the future trend of the water treatment facility are talking about the micrometers and also the nanometers. We are talking a very strict element to be removed in our water supply. And this is what we have found. Some of the pollutants, especially the EDC, particularly hormone and drug, have been found in our drinking water sources and also water supply, including Malaysia. As we can see that few rivers that we are looking at are also recording some of this EE2, the contraceptive pill compound hormone in our waterways. Even though the concentrations have been recorded, but we are still in the safe limit. And of course, the road of exposure will finally end up in our human body through different routes of exposure: inhalations, direct exposure, ingestion, and also the dermal contact. And not only that, we also found out that the multi-class endocrine disrupting compound in urban tropical river, and from that we found out more than 14 endocrine disrupting compound in our river. Caffeine, bisphenol A, diclofenac, and also testosterone were found in the higher concentration, for example. Even though this particular compound has been found in the waterways, risk quotients indicate that the insignificant risk of EDC, meaning that the level are still low and the amount of the water intake of the consumers are still tolerable, but somehow the risk management and monitoring framework is proposed for the safe water resources. So this is just a comparison between the EDC in the drinking water supply system, including the river water and also the tap water. So the concentration might be varies, but we can see that the caffeine, the diclofenac, and also the bisphenol A exist in a significant concentration at both water bodies. And of course, many EDCs remain largely unexplored, and we are only monitored around 25 compounds, but we found out around 14 compounds having some significant concentration in waterways. And Malaysians are potentially exposed to the EDC via drinking water consumption, but from that, we can say that the tap water poses a higher risk compared to the river water. Why? Okay, the river water are untreated while the tap water is treated. This can be considered because of the piping system, and some of these are still using the PVC plastic types of the piping system that may leach out of this certain pollutant in the environment. And some of this compound may accumulate, may absorb on the surface of this piping system, and there will be some backwash of this particular pollutant in our drinking water system. And tap water contaminations, multi-class endocrine disrupting compound in different housing type. We also studied about the differences between the lower housings and also higher housing, even though there is some significant differences between those housing types, but the risk quotient are still below than the risk that we should looking at. And children were exposed to higher risk of EDC. Of course, children are quite fragile compared to the older groups, and drinking water ingestions on the body weight basis in this early stage are very significant compared to the adults. Different physiological properties and also daily activities of the life groups is also one of the key factors that may contribute to the exposure of the EDC in our daily life. And of course, exposure and risk of drinking water consumption. This is also due to the lack of public awareness and also political obligation in supporting the rectifications of a new drinking water treatment facilities and also guidelines. And with that, we come up with also the new technology to remove those particular pollutants by using the natural product. The one that we are having now is actually the kenaf. And from that, they can remove up to the 99% of the hormone found out in our water. And this is what we are working on to come up with a green and also safe sounds of technology to remove this endocrine disrupting compound in our water. And not only that, kenaf core is also found to remove up to 99% of the contraceptive hormone in our water. And we are using also the coconut shell modified biochar that found to remove up to 99% of the diazone, which is commonly used in the agricultural practices. And not only that, we are also looking at the metal organic framework, a new technology, a new branch of the reticular chemistry that quite promising, where they provide a very good hierarchical structure, immense pore volume, large surface area, and also recyclable to remove this particular lower concentration up to picogram per liter of the pollutants. The removal of EDC by using the MOF is quite promising, where they can deal with the complex water contaminations, and the cost of water facility can be actually also improved much. So why we need to know about the EDC is commonly very dangerous, and commonly the EDC is actually present in the mixture, and the long-term exposure will give some significant health risks. And the analysis of the occurrence EDC, looking at the drinking water sources as a pollution, effective treatment technology, and also the potential human exposure. There will be some adverse impact and knowledge gap in the EDC. As I mentioned before, the public are still not aware about the danger of the EDC in the environment, and there is a need of the regulatory rectification to also include the EDC in our water supply. And we also need public awareness and also the political obligation. Risk perception is the potential mitigating, where the people need to be updated, what they need to know, what they need to use, and how they can actually minimize the usage of the EDC in their daily life, for example. And with that, the holistic system, the integrated solution, the multi-barrier approach in monitoring and management is needed, where the upscaling the studies to the basin scale is very important in order for us to solve the problem. We need to regulate the usage. We need to understand the risks and also the ecological to the human health. We need to conduct the assessment, priority some of these particular pollutants, and also the compound or the chemicals, characterize, manage, and also mitigate. And of course, we need to also understand about the future condition by using the estimation and also the prediction tool, by using the artificial intelligence and also IoT sensors to monitor these particular pollutants. And the risk management monitoring framework for pharmaceutical drinking water supply system support the multi-barrier approach in drinking water supply system, monitor and also manage the safe water resources. These are the complete proposal, the framework that we can actually apply in our water supply network. And of course, the integration of big data and also IoT in monitoring and also managing EDC is also very important nowadays. Nonetheless, the results concern the transport and also impact of DC in drinking water supply system is very important. Further exploration by using a new technology is very important, especially for the water operators. And the risk communication between the government and also the public is also very important. Community-based risk governance with the two-way interactive combination is very important. We need to understand the concept of the top-down approach, the direct intentions towards the water, and also the pollutions away from the risk. And we need to also include the public in terms of the bottom-up approach to make sure that it can create the salient value in the risk processing. So the combinations between the stakeholders and also the public is very important in order for us to mitigate the issues. So I think that's all my presentation for today, and I hope that you can get some idea and also enjoy the presentation. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. It's a very wonderful sharing from you. I think in our water industry in Malaysia, most of the time we talk about water quality is really a main issue at the moment. But one of the area that you're always talking about in your presentation just now, you're talking about a holistic, which is include all the other pollutant EDC. Prof, is there any sample or any data collected on the presence of EDC in the treated water in Malaysia?
Okay, specifically, we are not collecting any water coming from the water treatment facility because of the issue of, for example, as you understand that some of the water operators are not allow us to directly collect the water samples from their facility. But what we are doing is actually to collect the water that are directly coming from the outlet of the water facility so that we can compare before and also after. And from that, we can see some significant increment and also decrement of this EDC. In a certain area, there is an increment of the EDC before and also after. After the treatment facility, the numbers of the EDC is increased because of, I understand that some of these water treatment facilities are still using very conventional water treatment technology. For example, the backwash might release some of this accumulated EDC in their waterways. So that's the reason why we can see some of these water treatment facilities are having higher concentrations of EDC compared to before water coming into their water treatment facilities.
Thank you, Prof. I think this is the key point that the water industry should start looking into this element in the raw water analysis.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We do not receive any question from. This one. Sorry, Prof. Question from Dr. Harun Aisha Mohiuddin. The question is: most of the measures suggestion to reduce EDC are still in the research and development stage. What is the current practice that has been applied so far?
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So yes, I agree with that. Okay, because as I mentioned before, the EDC is hundreds of thousands. Okay, some of EDC are still unknown, and it's not easy for us to go into every single of EDC for us to settle the problem. But we are having some of these practices to reduce this. For example, the Ministry of Health has launched the return back policy. For example, if you have unused or expired medicine at home, don't just throw it in the dustbin or flush it away in your toilet. You can just bring it back into the pharmacy and put it into the box for the proper collections. And also, for example, they need to send it to the quality alarm for the dispose, for example. And not only that, as I mentioned before, the multi-barrier approach is very important. Okay, we are not only looking at the scientific approach, but we need to also make sure that the public are aware. So there's been many activities. For example, in my laboratory, we are also engaged with the public community to make sure that they understand what's the EDC and how they can actually reduce. When I mention about the EDC exposure, some people might become afraid, panic. The water that they drink, the food that they consume, and so on may contain the EDC. I can say that yes, we drink, we eat the EDC every day. We can't avoid that because the clothes that we are using, the pharmaceutical product that we consume every day, the personal care product, including the deodorant, the detergents that you use to wash our clothes and so on, are all contain the endocrine disrupting compound. But the most important message that we need to deliver to the public and also the stakeholder is how we can actually minimize that. If we we can reduce the usage of plastic, why not? We reduce the use of the plastic, for example. If we do not need to use, for example, a certain product and we have some option to use it, why not we take the option that we can reduce the direct contact with the DC for our daily life? I hope that is answered.
Yeah, thanks, Prof. I think the point here is even it is at the research and development stage, but it has been throughout your research, it is going to be a problem. It is going to be an issue in the water supply, which is going into our body. I think this is the key things that is we need to start looking into the, as you said, holistic control. Especially, we have developed our water safety plan, which it got to be probably one of the elements that the water safety plan should also look into. This is what the well, not a major pollutant at the moment, but it definitely is going to be an issue if it is not controlled and there's no awareness from the beginnings from now on. Yeah, I think this is where a very good sharing, Prof. I think this is something that opened up everybody's eyes. And
it might be sooner or later because, as I mentioned before, every day we synthesize a new chemical, new pollutant. So whether we like it or not, this is something that we need to do.
Yes. I wish and I hope that your research further on that will be really enhanced and help the water supply industry in our country and perhaps globally. Prof, there's no more question from the floor. I would like to say thank you to you for your time and your effort and sharing. Thank you for the floor and the audience that following this session. Before I conclude this session, as a small announcement, we are having in this whole tree, we're going to have a keynote by Yang Berbahagia Datuk Sri Engineer Dr. Zaini Ujang, the Secretary General of Ministry of Environment and Water, Malaysia, 2 o'clock in this hall later on. I hope everybody can join and listen to him. He definitely is a good speaker, and he always have a good point to share and talk about water. Thank you already. We come back again after the keynote address in the afternoon. We see you again. Thank you very much.